Hello and welcome to another video on the Knight Ministries channel. I am your host, Jeremy Knight. Don't forget to like the video and enjoy the show. Okay. In this video, I would like to talk a little bit more about some quasi-cult-like behaviors of young Earth creationism and how they behave a little bit like a cult. I would not say that young Earth creationism is a true cult, but they do have some cult-like behaviors. And if you really want to know why I would not say that they are a true cult, I do believe I did explain that in my previous video. So yeah, in this video we are going to talk a little bit more about the quasi-cult-like behaviors of young Earth creationism. So I hope you enjoy this video. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the doctrine of creation. There is a doctrine in Christianity known as the doctrine of creation. And put simply, it states that God created everything. That's pretty much all it states. There is no mention in the doctrine of creation about how there is nothing mentioned in the doctrine of creation about the age of the earth or the age of the universe, or whether or not there was a global flood. There is nothing mentioned in the doctrine of creation about any of that stuff. Young Earth creationism is not a required belief for Christianity. It just isn't. This isn't a salvation issue, and we really need to stop pretending like it is. It isn't one. You don't need to believe in young Earth creationism in order to be saved. You really don't. Young Earth creationists love to make mountains out of molehills, and love to pretend like something that isn't an issue is an issue. Because it is not an issue to believe in a young Earth. You don't need to believe in it. You really don't. And they need to stop trying to pretend like we do need to believe in it. There's no evidence for it. It's not stated in the doctrine of creation. It's not stated in the Bible, no matter how much you want to try to pretend like it is. The Bible does leave room for scientific discussions, and it does leave room for the scientific evidence of the age of the earth and the age of the universe. It does leave room for that. The Bible does leave room for the scientific evidence of the age of the earth and the age of the universe. No matter how much you want to try to say it doesn't, it does. Another belief that young Earth creationists insist that we should believe, that we don't really need to believe, is the global flood. No, we don't need to believe that. This isn't a salvation issue. Stop trying to force your beliefs down our throats. We don't need to believe it. There's no evidence for it. There is no evidence for a global flood. The Bible does not say that the flood was global. It really doesn't. Worldwide does not mean global. There is a difference between worldwide and global. If you've ever dealt with third world countries, you can kind of see the difference between worldwide and global. But yeah, there is no evidence for a global flood. There never has been. There never will be. You do not need to believe in a global flood to be a saved Christian. You really don't. This is not a salvation issue. Please stop trying to make it into one. The doctrine of creation says nothing about the age of the earth or the universe. It says nothing about a global flood. The Bible does leave room for accepting the scientific age of the earth and the scientific age of the universe. It does leave room for accepting those things. Okay? This is not a salvation issue. Stop pretending like it is one. Okay? Stop it. Okay, so now I want to talk a little bit about how well I have studied the Bible. I have studied the Bible quite well. I've read it from front cover to back cover, from back cover to front cover, and then from front cover to back cover again. There is nothing that you can quote from the Bible that would surprise me. There really isn't. So yeah, I've studied the Bible quite extensively. I know it better than some pastors. So yeah, I know the Bible very well. And trust me when I say this. There is nothing mentioned in the Bible about the age of the earth or the age of the universe. No matter how much you want to manipulate it to try to make it sound like it says that. No matter how much you want to try to pretend like it says that, it does not. There is nothing mentioned in the Bible about the age of the earth or the age of the universe. So I do not need to believe your ridiculous beliefs. I don't. It is not a salvation issue. Stop pretending like it is one. Young Earth creationism is not a salvation issue. Stop pretending like it is one. Not all Young Earth creationists do this, though. Because there are Young Earth creationists that do recognize that Young Earth creationism is not a salvation issue. It's like there are more than one group of Young Earth creationists, and some groups are more friendly than others. I'm usually friends with the ones that are more friendly than other groups. And some Young Earth creationists do recognize that Young Earth creationism is not a salvation issue and have no problem accepting that old Earth creationists are just as much Christian as they are. They have no problem accepting that evolutionary creationists are just as much Christian as they are. And yes, evolutionary creationism is a thing. Look up biologos. It is a thing. I am an old Earth creationist, but yeah, evolutionary creationism is a thing. Look up biologos. So, yeah, I've studied the Bible quite extensively. I know what it says. Okay? Let me make some clarifications so that nobody says that I'm saying something I'm not. I am not saying that I'm an expert on the Bible. I am not saying that I'm a theologian, because I am neither of those things. I'm just an apologist. Although I'm a little bit more studied in theology than most apologists, and I do know theology quite well, and I do know Scripture quite well, and I am going to stick by what I said of me knowing Scripture better than some pastors. I do know it better than some pastors. But I am not saying that I am an expert. There are people out there that do know more about the Bible than I do. And I bet you I do know more about the Bible than some people that also exist out there. So, yeah, I'm not an expert. I'm just a well-learned person that knows a lot of stuff. That's all I am. I'm a well-learned person that knows a lot of stuff. Okay? Okay, so yes, some have said that the Noah flood story does talk about a global flood. Some have said that. And there are Christians that do read the Noah flood story a different way. Not all Christians believe in a global Noah flood. There are some Christians that do believe in a Noah flood, but will qualify that the Noah flood was not global. And then there are Christians that just simply don't believe in a Noah flood. I'm not one of those ones. I'm the type that says that there was a guy named Noah. He is a historical figure. He did build a boat. He did save his family. And he did save some animals along with his family. But the flood that he survived with that boat was not a global flood. The true, real flood that the Noah story is based off of was not a global flood. So yes, there is a real flood that the Noah flood story was based off of. But it was not a global flood. That's what I believe. Okay? Not all Christians believe in a global flood. Okay? As I have said in other videos, not all Christians take the early chapters of Genesis as literal. And when I say the early chapters of Genesis, I'm talking about Genesis chapters 1 to 11. Not all Christians take those chapters as literal. But that being said, there are other literal ways of reading those chapters of Genesis that is not the young earth way. Young earth creationism is not the only literal way to read the early chapters of Genesis. If you research Reasons to Believe, a ministry founded by Hugh Ross, and you read their book Navigating Genesis and A Matter of Days, if you read their books Navigating Genesis and A Matter of Days, those two books make it very clear that RTB, which is short for Reasons to Believe, does take the early chapters of Genesis literally, just not in the same literal sense that young earth creationists take it. So yes, there are groups of old earth creationists that do take the early chapters of Genesis literally, just slightly less literal than young earth creationists take it. So there are other literal ways of reading the early chapters of Genesis. Okay? young earth creationism is not the only literal way of reading the early chapters of Genesis. RTB's way of reading the early chapters of Genesis is also literal. It is. Whether you want to believe it is or isn't, is not the point. The point is, it is a literal way of reading the early chapters of Genesis. Okay? It is. Deal with it. Denying it is not dealing with it. But the fact remains, old earth creationism is a literal way of reading the early chapters of Genesis. It is. Okay? I also want to talk a little bit about evidence from science for young earth creationism and evidence from science for a global flood. Yeah, there isn't any. There is no evidence from science for a young earth. There is no evidence from science for a young universe. Not for 6,000-year-old earth. Not for 6,000 to 10,000-year-old universe. There's no evidence for any of this. There's no evidence for a global flood. None whatsoever. No matter how much you want to manipulate the data to make it sound like it says that, it does not. Same thing goes for young Earth or young universe. No matter how much you want to manipulate the data to make it sound like it says that, it does not say that. There is no evidence for a young Earth or a young universe or a global flood. None of these things are supported by science. None of them. And because they are not supported by science, I am not going to believe them. And as I've said before, they are not required for my salvation, so I am not going to believe them. Young Earth creationism is not a salvation issue, so I do not need to believe it. Okay? It is not supported by science, it is not a salvation issue, so I do not need to believe it. There are also other ways to read the Bible that do not require me to believe in a young Earth. So I will go with those ways. But yeah, it isn't supported by science, so I'm not going to believe it. Okay? Okay, so now time to talk a little bit about the hidden history of young Earth creationism. The history of young Earth creationism that they don't want you to know. I talked a little bit about this in my last video, and what I talked about was Archbishop James Ussher and how most of the beliefs of modern day young Earth creationism only date back to Archbishop James Ussher. Do some research on Ussher chronology. In this video, I would like to talk a little bit about Ellen White and how a lot of the beliefs of young Earth creationism date back to Ellen White and Seventh-day Adventism. So yeah, we are going to talk a little bit about Ellen White and Seventh-day Adventism and their links to young Earth creationism. Okay? When I was a young Earth creationist, I was not allowed to know about James Ussher or Ellen White or Seventh-day Adventism and how they connect to the beginning of young Earth creationism. I was not allowed to know this stuff. No one was allowed to know this stuff. It's just not something that is taught when they try to get you to believe in young earth creationism. It's hidden history. They don't want you to know that this stuff occurred or that this stuff exists. But yeah, Ellen White, Seventh-day Adventism, and James Ussher has a lot to do with the beginnings of young earth creationism. And I think it's good that people should know this stuff, okay? Okay, in this part I would like to talk about Ellen G. White, Seventh-day Adventist, and George McReady Price. These people had a big role in the origins of young earth creationism that a lot of people don't know about. And in this part, I would like to reveal the role that they played in the origins of young earth creationism. A lot of the modern day beliefs of young earth creationism come from the Seventh-day Adventist Church. Some people don't want to admit that that is the case, but it is the case. Ellen G. White was a prophetess of the Seventh-day Adventist Church. And Mr. Price here was also a pastor in the Seventh-day Adventist Church. Miss White, she had visions of a young Earth, 6,000-year-old, and basically the beginnings of Noah flood geology. And Price, he also came up with a lot of the early beliefs of young Earth creationism, including 6,000-year-old Earth, and helped advance the flood geology that Miss White had already started. Before the 1920s, young Earth creationism was a very small part of the church. After the 1920s, it became a much bigger part of the church here in the United States. Before the 1970s, other flavors of creationism were well known of, such as old Earth creationism and theistic evolutionism, now known as evolutionary creationism. And it was well known that these other flavors existed. But by the 1990s, the word creationist became synonymous with young Earth creationism, to the point where people would automatically think of young Earth creationism every time the word creationism or creationist was mentioned, even though old Earth creationism continued to exist. Evolutionary creationism continued to exist. These other flavors continued to exist. But people would associate creationism solely with young Earth creationism after the 1990s, thanks to what Ellen G. White and Mr. Price did. There were a few other people involved, such as Whitcomb, if I remember his name correctly. But basically, yeah. If it hadn't been for Ellen G. White and Mr. Price here, young Earth creationism would not be nearly as popular as it is today. Now, the whole 6,000 to 10,000-year-old universe thing came after Price, but that was just an expansion upon the ideas that Price had already built upon. So, yeah. If it wasn't for the Seventh-day Adventist Church, young earth creationism would not be as popular as it is today. And all too many people don't know this. So I want to make sure people know this. Okay? Okay, now I would like to start talking about Whitcomb, Morris, and Ram. John Whitcomb, Henry Morris, they were young earth creationists that advanced the works of Price and Miss White, although they claimed to not be followers of Price or Miss White. But they still advanced the works of Price and Miss White and made young earth creationism even more popular. Ram was an old earth creationist that wrote a book called Christian View of Science and Scripture. In this book, he tried to encourage people to give up on young earth creationism and gap theory and pursue what he called progressive creationism, which would later on be known as old earth creationism. So, yeah, Mr. Ram wanted everyone to become old earth creationists, which is what I am. I have not read his book, but I have read reviews of it. And I do have it on a wish list to read. It sounds like a good book. Anyways, yeah, that's these people. And that's their involvement in the origins of young earth creationism and how it became as popular as it is today. So, yeah. That's what I wanted to talk about. That book that Mr. Ram wrote, it was published in 1954. So it's an old book. Been out for a while now. So yeah. I'm not the first one to tell people to give up on young earth creationism. But it is still a good idea. Give up on young earth creationism. Okay? Young earth creationism is stupid and really needs to stop being a thing. Okay? Mr. Ram's efforts to get rid of young earth creationism failed, and I don't expect my efforts to succeed either. But it is still a good idea, so I'm still gonna keep on saying it. Even though Mr. Ram's efforts backfired on him, and mine probably will too, I will keep on saying it, and I will keep on encouraging Christians all across the United States to give up on young earth creationism. And I will keep on encouraging people to become old earth creationists. I'll keep on encouraging Christians to become old earth creationists, because old earth creationism is where the evidence is at. It is what is supported by the evidence, and it is what Christians should be. And I will keep on encouraging Christians to be that, because it is the right thing to do. The evidence is on my side. And I will follow Christ and the evidence. Okay? Follow Christ. Yeah, that sounds like a good note to end this video on. Follow Christ. Don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe, and ring the bell. And follow me on Twitter and join my Discord. This has been a video on the Knight Ministries channel. I am your host, Jeremy Knight, and I just want to say, see you next time.